Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I'm Bart Loeser. I'm the program coordinator for our continuing education program here in District 55. We try to come up with lots of different educational programs to meet the needs of our various different members and leaders in the community. And one of the things that I'd like to promote most is the idea that you guys can ask for any type of class that might be of interest to you. But we have classes on evaluations. We have, of course, table topics tonight, various different speaking skills presentations, leadership skills presentations. We generally have one presentation per week. So to find out more about all of those particular classes that are offered, you can go to the district website, which is tmd55.org, toastmasterdistrict55.org. And we'll have a list there under either the continuing education page, or you can look at the calendar and see what classes and training programs are going on. But there's always lots of education happening here in our district. And I've always been a big proponent of educating people, as this is a self-paced program. We have lots of great opportunities, and given the amount of experience we have here in the organization, we have lots of great people available to train. If anybody out there wants to work on your training skills or has a particular seminar you are interested in seeing or perhaps presenting on, please do let me know. I'm available, and you can find me also on the Toastmaster District website under the leadership list. And I'm pretty easy to find. But I'll go ahead and welcome you guys here. Today, we are going to talk about table topics. And as you guys may know, table topics is a Toastmaster specific name for impromptu speaking series, or an impromptu speaking part of every Toastmasters meeting. As you can imagine, it's a very important skill to be able to address, because in any situation, whether you're at a dinner party or you just happen to be in an interview or anywhere else you could be in your life, you encounter situations where people will ask you questions and you're expected to come up with an answer. Now, in Toastmasters, they don't let you go on forever. Table topics are limited to 1 to 2 minutes, and there's always that 30-second grace period that people have to finish up. It's interesting that I find some people have a great deal of problems trying to get to that first minute. Others, like myself, think 3 minutes is not quite enough. And yet Toastmasters is about fitting in your speech into a time frame and a time commitment that makes it easy for people to listen, as well as it perhaps helps others who are quite as loquacious as myself to stay focused on the task. And in table topics, that task means you stay focused with some sort of a point within 1 to 2 minutes. I'm going to teach you a little bit about one technique that I use, and I'll add that in probably at the end. Perhaps maybe one of our panelists might even come up with this technique, since it's certainly not mine alone, but it's a technique that I use that is simple, that I can walk up when I get called on a table topic, or if I'm on Zoom, where I can just immediately think, how do I organize this thought? And it's a simple organization tool. We have 3 great speakers with lots of experience who are on the call today. And so I wanted to have an opportunity to be able to introduce these 3. And I do have the pleasure of having Wilma Igwe, who's going to be our first speaker on the call. And then Jason Wold will be our second speaker. And then Cynthia Vahle will be our third speaker. So I'm thrilled to have them all here on our particular call. If you'll give me just a moment, I will find some information here and get us started. Let's see here. I'm going to close this. All right. I'm looking for the chat room, which has disappeared. There it is now. Great. All right. So I'll go ahead and just start off with our first speaker, Wilma Igwe. She has been DTM since 2021 and in Toastmasters since 2011. She's a member of 3 distinguished clubs and has served 3 terms as district chief judge, has been a frequent competitor in speech, evaluation, and table topics. I'm sure we may be seeing her in the competition for humorous speech and/or international speech that will be starting up with the speech season in January. No pressure, Wilma. But I do want to welcome then Wilma Igwe. Please take it over, Wilma.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, Bart. I am very, very excited to speak to you. Let me start my little timer. Take just a moment or two and tell me when I'm over. But when it comes to table topics, understand that for me, it goes back to why I joined Toastmasters. I joined Toastmasters to organize my life. I was going through a lot of different things when it came along, and I was looking for something to do and to get me out of and away from the stresses of my everyday life. So it wasn't really about becoming a better professional or becoming a better speaker. But I learned that for me, everything is about learning to edit. I'm chatty, right, Jason? Right, Cynthia? I'm chatty. And I need to make sure that I organize my thoughts where people can hear me. I was going through a contentious divorce and separation and custody battle, and I needed to be heard without being combative, need to answer questions on the fly that were important and still could lighten up a very tense moment. Jason understands that one of my superpowers is that I make very, very difficult speeches about anything from racism to divorce to violence. And I still make it a point to insert humor in there, get the point across, bring in the serious, but also kind of take away the sting of it so that my audience can hear. So that's what I do. And when it comes to table topics, it's no different. If you can make a long speech, you just kind of learn to shorten it. What else did you need to know or ask me?
Well, one thing I'd love to know is, do you have a specific technique that you use that helps you to stay organized and yet also present in a way that keeps whatever it is you're going to address interesting and fun?
One of the things that I do is, we talk a lot in business as well as in Toastmasters about the elevator speech or that pocket speech that you always have in your pocket, I guess, or your wallet. You have those pocket speeches. For me, it's making sure it's about self-awareness. So table topics run the gamut. You never know what they're going to throw at you, especially if Jason Wold is doing your table topics. You're talking about cars one day, biscuits the next, and the cost of tea in China. You just never know. So what I find works for me is to organize it with repeating the question, or at least a portion of the question, and listening to that question and finding what part of that question can I relate to. Jason asks weird questions. He may, again, incorporate a lot of different elements, but which one of those elements can I relate to? And I address that element rather than trying to think about something so ethereal and far off the chart. However, I organize it like a regular speech. I have an opening, I have some blah, blah, blah stuff in the middle. And then at the end, I go back to my opening. The end of every speech is always the opening. Thanks.
That's a great approach. That's something that I've had to learn, which is try to come up with an interesting opening, but that also means when I'm doing a table topic, I have to remember how I opened it and try then to come up with some way to bring that back at the very end. So, but I do find that the perfect bookend to any sort of speech, but especially in my table topic.
Right.
Well, in terms of table topics, I know every couple years we have that as a contest. And I wanted to find out if you've ever been involved in a table topics contest. And if so, how have you found that different than doing table topics in your clubs?
Table topics contests are, they're similar in that you're going to get that off the wall question. I think the nerve wracking, the part that I have to deal with is controlling the energy. When some people, when they get nervous, they close in and withdraw. I become quite frenetic and I am active, and I figure it's like hitting a moving target. If I move fast enough, they won't see that I don't know what I'm talking about. So I go ahead and kind of make sure that I control my energy and take a few seconds, just a few, at the very start. I don't make a move. I don't utter a word until take a deep breath. Then I can answer the question. The beauty of contest questions is typically they are questions that you can relate to. They're not so far-fetched but they're also not so plain and common, but they're questions that you can actually answer. You can hear it in a you can hear it in an interview. There are questions that you will hear having a conversation at a potluck. So that part makes it really wonderful. Thinking about being judged, don't do that, because you're real nervous that there are people watching you going, I don't know if she said that right. So that's the hard part. But at the same time, it's a beautiful.
Oops.
Lost you there for a second.
We lost you, so yeah.
No problem. But you hear so much in table topics contests. If you go before, all contestants get the same question. If you are one of the first, then you get to hear everyone after you. And to hear their take on the exact same question, it's mind-blowing. It's actually mind-blowing. And it goes to show how we're so very, very unique and different, but we're also quite united in our efforts to become better communicators.
I'd have to say that that's probably one of the most interesting thing I ever find in the table topics contest, because everyone gets the same table topic. They just they're locked away until they are called out, but then they get that table topic, and it shows you just how very different people come at any idea. Because what you thought was, this must be where I go from, I'm sure everyone is, and suddenly you get everyone coming up with a completely different approach. So it's fascinating to me. Well, I had a wonderful position I wanted to ask you, which is some clubs recommend having an evaluator specifically for the table topics session, whether that's the table topics master or its own role as table topics evaluator. Have you seen that done, and what is your recommendation in that area?
That's a really wonderful observation. I have seen that, especially during the pandemic and during the shutdown and so many Zoom meetings, et cetera. I've seen that more in other countries. I've not seen it in the United States, but I know that there's a couple of clubs in Canada, a club in Italy that I had visited, and one in Germany that's what they did. And it made for a very long meeting too, I'll tell you. That was like a 2.5-hour meeting, and they had a break in the middle. I was happy because I turned off the camera and took a nap, but that's just me. But they did have an evaluator, and I found it to be quite beneficial to the members and very, very, it was exciting. It was different to me, but at the same time, to think that, in most of our clubs, we will see that table topics, you will call on people who don't have a role already in the meeting. So if you have 3 speakers, your speakers are not going to engage in table topics, your evaluators will not, your Toastmaster will not. So if you have these people who don't have a speaking role or a major role, it's beautiful, and it gives them the opportunity to participate, but also to receive some feedback on how they did. And it's absolutely beneficial. I even recommend, and I know in one of my clubs, we have actually done this once, and that was to have a table topics meeting with an evaluation for each table topic participant. 5 topics, 5 evaluators, flip it, 5 more topics, 5 evaluators. And it's great. It's a 2-minute speech, and you got a 2 to 3 minute evaluation. It was absolutely beautiful. So it's beneficial if you can work that out in your club.
That is a great thought, because I'm a big believer that Toastmasters is really all about the evaluations. I mean, it's one thing to have the courage to step up and give a speech, but it's what you can learn from that. And generally, since we don't see ourselves all that clearly, you may get up and give an icebreaker or any type of speech, and then at the end think, oh my gosh, that was horrible. And everyone else is thinking, well, no, it wasn't bad. You just might want to look at this or work on this. So it helps us to, I think, be more honest, but it takes it up to a new level when you know you're going to be evaluated.
Mm-hmm.
You give it some serious thought. It's almost like in an interview, when you in a job interview and you're asked a question, you're on the line. You want to come up with an answer that is succinct, but also has impact, and that makes you look good.
Exactly.
And of course, if I could be funny doing it too, that would be great as well.
Well, the funny part, funny table topics always works on online dating.
Well, I think every date I've ever had was pretty funny, but that's a good point you make. So I want to thank you for presenting your perspective, and we'll get
Thank
back to
you.
you as well, but thank you for your time. And I'll go ahead and move on to our second presenter, Jason Wold. And Jason, as a fellow Toastmaster, Jason is always looking for ways to improve his skills and share them with others. Having been a Toastmaster since 2012, he has given and received plenty of table topics, and he has competed a time or two. So Jason likes table topics because it is a skill that translates into every life and situations. The best way to improve and practice. Please welcome Jason Wold.
Thank you, Bart. And I really love the way Wilma brings out the best in people. She has a way to just bring out that energy, and she brings up a lot of good points. Most of this presentation you'll be able to find online on the Toastmasters website under impromptu speaking. And I'll quickly run through and instill some of my own items in that. But please feel free to throw out a question in chat or anything that I can answer. I will be happy to do so. All right, let's see here. I need this button. And I will try to keep my presentation brief because I know we all want to see me and not the PowerPoint. So everything I do usually in Toastmasters involves a 12-step program. But since Bart's given me a limited amount of time, I have to cut it down. So we're going to cut it down to 4. This is the abridged version of my 12-step program for table topics. Now, how many of you have seen this face when someone gets asked a table topic? Just that glare of, it's me, you picked me. The reason people have this is because now the adrenaline is now rushing to them. They're surprised. They don't know what's next. How many of you have been in that business meeting where the boss says, hey, Jason, can you answer this question? And you're looking at him with the same cat eyes. You called on me? Why did you call on me? This is one of the reasons why I joined Toastmasters, because it did happen to me. And I did not have a very good encounter after that point. So I needed to learn how to get past these staring eyes. The best way to do that is to keep getting hit by the same stimulus in table topics. It's all about practice. That adrenaline rush, that sense of surprise will go down the more times you are exposed to it, because now it's no longer a surprise. I assume we're all interested in finding out what the solution to the surprise of table topics is. And as Bart and Wilma were talking about, table topics is really a two-sided equation, first from the table topics master and from the receiver of the table topics. Because the last thing the table topics master should be trying to do is play stump the chump. And it has happened in many, many meetings. Wilma will say, that's all you do, Jason. I get it. But the goal of the table topics master is to get the person up and speaking on something, not trying to stump them while they stand up there and look foolish. So the first thing about table topics, and Wilma alluded to a lot of this, you have to listen to the question first. That doesn't mean you have to answer the question. You have to listen to the question first. And this is Wilma's secret, and it's a wonderful one. And I needed to learn this too. That pause at the beginning to gather your thoughts is amazingly needed. You may not think it is, but trust me, take that pause. I competed in the area contest for table topics many years ago. And the question that I got was, if you had a superpower, what would it be? That pause allowed me to win that table topics contest because it allowed me to take a moment to think of what everybody else was going to say. And it's always invisibility, flying, or something similar like that. Me, I chose mind reading and gave a great reason why. But I wouldn't have been able to come up with that if I hadn't taken that pause. And if you need to, you can always start your table topic in confirming the words of the question to make sure you're on the same page. And if you feel you need to waste a little bit of time getting started, this is a great way to do it. Table topics don't have to be perfect. They are there to get you speaking and getting used to being surprised. Now it's time to tell your table topic. Wilma gives a wonderful explanation of beginning, middle, and end. The best table topics and almost all the winners of the table topics contest when they get up into the higher levels are those people that come up with a great conclusion. And lastly, of course, the conclusion will make or break you. How do I do this? I love the little dog pictures Bart has put me onto, especially this guy is like, will I get it if I throw it out the window in a car? This is all about practice and getting up to doing the practice. Volunteer to be called on when table topics comes up. Volunteer to be the table topics master so that you can see the other side of this coin. It's always important, if you can, to be able to speak at every Toastmasters meeting. The more practice you get, the easier it is to handle. Strategies. How do I make it so that I'm not looking like a silly person just talking up there about nothing? Well, there are basic strategies to this. First, express an opinion. Well, I may like cats better than I like dogs, so maybe I should focus more on cat pictures. Nothing wrong with that, and I could easily fill a minute or a minute and a half on cats. Cause and effect things are wonderful when people ask you questions of, if you did this, what might happen? Cause and effect creates that connection so that you can bring your audience in. Break the topic into components, especially those really vague ones that say, like, how would you feel if you had the best time in your life? Wonderful table topic, but it's a little vague. I can go anywhere with it, so now I need to simplify it and bring it home. Past, present, and future, adding context. What was your favorite car, Jason? Now I have a past, present, and future I can put in for each for 30 seconds and come in right on time and have enough time left for that final conclusion. Well, he's one of my favorite cats. He was angry after we did this to him. I wonder why. We just rubbed him around on the carpet and threw him in the box of peanuts. What if I mess up? This is Toastmasters. This is the place where you want to mess up, not where I messed up in that executive meeting trying to explain all the things on my slide that I had no idea what they were. So here is where you do want to take those opportunities. And lastly, whatever you do, table topics is all about being confident, even if you have to fake it. It's okay to fake it on table topics. Be brief. You only have so much time. You cannot tell a 10-minute story in 2 minutes. Our joke master is very good at telling jokes, but he needs to get it down into the table topic range. Be sincere. Talk about something you feel good about. If you have to fake that too, sincerity is often the hardest thing to fake. So I would definitely try to be sincere. And lastly, it's all about the practice, risk versus reward, and it's up to you guys to choose wisely. Thank you, Bart.
Thank you very much, Jason. And we'll have some time for questions at the end of the 3 presentations. But if you guys want to put any questions as you're thinking about them into the chat, that way you don't have to necessarily be totally impromptu. It's a great way to
remember them for later.
Exactly. I'll always forget. Oh, I had a question, but I forgot. So thank you for that great presentation, Jason. And our third speaker is Cynthia Vahle. And Cynthia is, as she says, she's absolutely loves table topics. She's the president of Sunday Speakers and Top Notch Trainers in San Antonio. It's a wonderful, wonderful group. And I do want to welcome Cynthia, and she has her time now. So thank you, Cynthia, for being on our panel.
Thank you, Bart, for having me. I do love table topics because no memorization is required. I find the older I get, it's harder and harder to remember that really dynamic opening, as hard as I try. And I sometimes have to cheat with a note or a cue card. But in table topics, that is not the case. It's wholly, with the W, it's wholly me and whatever I want to say. And I just want to point out that I had those same words that Jason just put on his slide. But the first one is listening, and that's why I joined Toastmasters. Much like Wilma, standing up and speaking to a room of people is not a problem. But probably what I was saying to them wasn't as great as it could have been. So listening was why I joined Toastmasters, and listening to the question, as Jason alluded to at a contest, you can cue in on maybe a word or part of what the question or the comment or scenario is that you're being presented with, and just run from there. I remember in a contest, and I won, being asked what I thought about social media. Instead of talking about Facebook and Instagram and tweeting, I talked about how good it was to connect with childhood friends. And this was sort of nascent Facebook. And then I went into 40 seconds of what a great neighborhood I grew up in and all the kids that were corner to corner. And so it turned into a story that was relatable, and all those points that Jason just gave you. And that was my answer. It wasn't specifically a black and white, oh, I think social media is bad, something like that. But the one thing that I try to tell people is it's a great way to learn to segue into something you do want to talk about, because if you ask me a question that I don't like the question, or I don't really know where I'm going to go with the answer, I can segue. Jason alluded to that as well. If you ask me, Cynthia, what is your favorite kind of dog? I could go off and I could say, oh, I could do hot dogs. It doesn't have to be a four-legged dog. Or I could say something about talking about dogs. Let me tell you about my guard cat. You can just segue. And I think segue is the most important or one of the most important aspects of table topics and impromptu speaking. The elevator speech or the elevator questions. Have you finished that report yet, Cynthia? I don't want to say no, but I can find a way to let my boss know, other than yes, I'm not quite done, but I'm so close, you won't believe it. I'll have a good answer to give him. The other thing I wanted to mention, and Jason alluded to it too, and this is what happens when you go third. You have a lot of content for your answer from the people who went before you. Don't overthink it. If you're sincere, if you're brief, just give your answer. I'm not saying don't think about it, because of course you want to think about it, but use what you know and don't try to remember some great statistics or facts that you heard on the news 2 days earlier or 2 years ago, because you'll just stumble. And even if you stood up there and gave a statistic as part of your answer, if you were to, my grandpa used to say, do you know how many people are dying to get into cemeteries? And as kids, we'd go, oh, Grandpa's so smart. He knows it's all of them. Well, of course it's all of them. So just go with what you know. And the other thing is, when you're the topic master, I haven't really heard anyone have difficulties presenting or coming up with table topics because it's Halloween. Of course, my last club meeting, the meeting theme was Halloween, the table topics was Halloween, and we had a lot of fun with it. Our word of the day was orange. And I'll tell you, that was harder for people to fit into a conversation than most adjectives or nouns, just using a color. So I just saw something pop up. Bart, are you asking me what technique I use to make it funny?
Could be.
Okay. I think if I dig back into my childhood, and if I can bring up some combination of whatever the question may be, growing up in a very Catholic neighborhood where from corner to corner, there were 72 kids to play with. And my family only had 5 kids. So everyone thought my parents didn't like each other very well. If you talk about going to an all-girl Catholic school and smoking cigarettes in the parking lot, there are humorous anecdotes about being a female veteran and serving on active duty. There are anecdotes about being a grandma. I asked my grandson one time, what are you going to do since you don't have a television? He said, I'm going to read. I said, do you know how to read? He said, oh yeah, I just don't know the words. There are so many things you can think of, and you can even stretch a truth, if you will. Not everyone is inherently funny. Not every situation or table topic is inherently funny. If you want to use humor, you just have to you have to know your audience. That's one thing. And then you can, if you know them, if you feel them out correctly, you can probably get away with a lot verbally. Let me think. Here I am with nervous hand gestures and saying big long ums, and somehow I been a Toastmaster 20 years. I'm drawing a blank, trying not to repeat what's already been said. Is there anything in particular, Bart? Anything?
Well, I'd like to know your technique. Let's say, for instance, you may not get as nervous when you get called on, but I know if I'm in a meeting and I'm not playing a major role and there's not many other people there, I will get called on it for a table topic. So the moment they start table topics, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to get called on. How does one clear their mind? Because I'm always told by various experts who seem to win all the time, they just have this way of clearing their mind of everything so they can just pick up ideas the moment they hear a question. Because if you spend so much time in your head, all rattling around and worried and such, there is no way you can come up with a clear idea, much less something funny.
I hate to have to say this, but I've never experienced that. So I can't answer that question from the perspective of someone who's come a long way, baby, and now you're winning table topics contests. The work environment is somewhere where you do have to remain focused on the topic of the meeting at hand. So if you go into a meeting or a situation knowing that that's what you're going to talk about, coming up with answers or contributing is easy. Sitting in an audience, and I'm just trying to think hypothetically, if I was in an audience at, I don't know, somebody trying to sell cars, and they said, excuse me, young lady, what do you think is what is your favorite car? I'll use that example from before. First of all, I think I would stand up and say, well, thank you for calling me young. And then that's when you segue, or that's what you just go with what you know. You've stood up, you've walked to the lectern, you've thanked the table topics master or the topics master. And then that pause, because a few seconds, now when you're the person standing there, it seems like a long time, but to the audience, it's not really. And when you open your mouth, those first few words, I think it's like, okay, I've said 6 words, so I've got this. I know where I'm going now. I'm giving the answer to the question. I'm looking and I'm smiling. I'm making eye contact, and I'm a little bit funny or I'm a little bit serious, depending. And then I've hit the objective. I'm doing that blah, blah, blah middle part that Wilma just mentioned. And then how will I tie this together? So in my mind, this is what's the conversation that's happening, because I just know what I'm hearing come out of my mouth is okay or is good. I don't know how to give you an answer on something that I've never really experienced at Toastmasters.
All right. Well, thank you. As if there's nothing else to add, Cynthia, I'll go ahead and open it up to the 3 of you and ask a couple questions, and either of you could answer. And we've got a couple comments in here as well. I think Lewis has brought up a couple points that I'd like to know a little more what your opinion is. He mentions that one way he relaxes is that taking a deep breath before he speaks always works for him. One of the things I try to teach people about that they aren't necessarily aware of is how to really breathe. I always ask people, so do you breathe? And everyone says, yes, I breathe. Well, they don't really understand what's going on with breath. To truly relax the mind, you have to take in that as full of breath as possible to feed your body with as much oxygen. And people don't realize there's the upper lobes of the lungs and the lower lobes of the lungs. And if the upper lobes only hold 40% of the air, the lower lobes hold 60%. But when people get stressed, it's almost all upper. And the moment you let in air up here and fill in those lungs up here, you cannot put air in the lower lungs at that point. You've blocked that. So you must start in the lower lungs. So very consciously breathing air deep into your lower lungs. And then as you finish that, then you can allow more air to let your chest come up and out for the upper lungs and get 100% of air. So I believe when Lewis is talking about taking a deep breath, what we mean is a deep diaphragmatic breath to truly soak your body in oxygen to give your brain the best chance to be clear. And so it not only clears you of the stress and anxiety, but it can also clear up your mind and feed it with more oxygen. So I wanted to find out with you guys, what other techniques do you use to release anxiety? I mean, it seems that Cynthia has no anxiety in getting up in front of others, but for those of us who do have those anxieties, especially our newer Toastmasters, I wanted to know, what would you recommend for them in this case? And now I do agree with Lewis that before you go up there, take some really deep breaths and try to clear your mind of everything you can before you go up there. That's, for me, that's the best chance I have to come up with something clever that would really stand out and possibly in a contest, certainly to win. But what recommendations would you guys have for really clearing that mind and giving yourself the best opportunity to come up with an idea and pull it out of the files up here in the brain that I can't usually just do on command? So what do you guys do?
Well, the first thing I would do is one of Cynthia's techniques that she uses is she lets the pressure out so that she can perform. So when he was talking about, hey, young lady, what do you think about this car? And her response, first response, was to with words, let that pressure out so that she could perform better. I also find that internally telling myself, I got this, I can do it. Because we are our own worst critics, especially going into an unknown situation. Mm. As soon as you start talking down to yourself, saying, oh no, what am I going to do when I get up there? I don't know. What question did he ask me? Will I give the right answer? All that negative talk prevents you from being yourself and excelling at this. It's an exercise where it's okay to not have complete success. Mm-hmm. We're building toward perfection. We're never going to get there, but we're building toward it. And it starts first saying, I got this, I can do it.
And to build on what Jason just said, there is no wrong answer. And it doesn't have to be an opinion answer necessarily. But even if somebody says, what do you think about the current presidential election or something like that? The audience may be expecting serious answers, but you don't have to be humorous. You can just say politicians are lawyers. And what there's jokes about lawyers. You can say, I wanted to grow up and be a politician. I actually ran for city council. Maybe you really didn't, but you can just give the answer you're comfortable giving, especially if it's a hot topic. And that way you won't be sweating because, oh, so-and-so didn't know I'm a Democrat. Now they'll know if I give that answer. Well, it's not about that. It's about the answer you want to give.
Great. Thank you, Cynthia. Wilma?
I will tell you that the first few years of Toastmasters, and I joined in 2011, the first couple of years, very frequently, I would get called on for table topics as a new person. And I had it in my head I wasn't nervous except with my club. If you understand that, my club had a lot of very intimidating people in it. I had this notion to answer many questions, many table topic questions in other voices. One time I was a Southern beauty queen, and I had a drawl that was out of this world. One time I was the little Indian storekeeper on what is it, The Simpsons? Oh man, I dropped that accent like I was crazy. And then other times I answered it like, I was one of my kids. And, my son would say, that's a dumb question. And I went straight skater on him. It was a way for me to deflect, but also to adapt in the people that are in my family. So my kid, I have a Korean brother-in-law, and he knows that I'm going to get in there and throw down with him. And it just helped me deflect. But I will tell you that when it comes to contests, because that's my jam, when it comes to contests, normally you're going to have a staging area or a holding area, so to speak. They're going to ask a question, and you can do one of those dead man walking kind of things where you take your time getting up to the stage, thinking about what you're going to say when you get there. Of course, in some venues, it's really small, but most venues, you're going to have some time to kind of think about it before you go. Any time you're making a speech, practice in your clubs as well as a contest. The minute you make a gesture, the minute you say a word, your time starts. That's why I am a huge proponent of people going there, standing on your stage and just holding it. So that they don't time you for that, look at the topics master or the Toastmaster. Keep your eyes on that person. Just watch them go sit down, watch them. I did that one time with a contest where Bill Friedrich was the Toastmaster, and it was during Fiesta. So he had on 1,000 medals, and my knees were just shaking. And I remember I was like, I'm going to stand here and I'm going to watch him go to his seat. And I watched him, and his medals were jangling, and I hadn't 10 seconds easily, and I hadn't uttered a word, just jingle, 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 jingle. And finally he turned around and he looked at me, and I just looked at him. And of course the audience started laughing, and he asked me later, he said, was I taking too long? I said, no, I needed to catch my breath, and your jingling took up all my, it distracted the audience. So I just say you kind of hold your own there, and just holding your own and taking those deep breaths is that's oxygen to your lungs.
Well, and Wilma, you bring up a great point about how you are funny, like taking advantage of the moment and making fun and making light of that, which then makes it funny for everyone. Lewis had made a comment. He says, it's easy to be funny if you're funny to begin with. Well, good luck for me. I'm not funny. But the point is that one of the things I try to do to be funny and when I'm doing table topics is when I'm given a question, the first thing I think of is what is the most typical way someone might answer the question? And then I say the opposite.
There you go.
I give people something they're not expecting at all. And that is one of the keys to humor. As a matter of fact, for anyone who wants to learn more about humor, we're going to be doing a program in a month from now from some of the top humorists in the district who will be teaching people how to prepare a humorous speech, which can be a table topic as well. So you can learn a lot from this. Amy Samet will be leading the panel, and we've got lots of incredibly funny people who will be there. Luisa Montalvo, who won second place at the World Championships just last year, the year before last. And so we've got some great speakers coming in. I believe it's November 30th, the very last Thursday of the month. So come and join us for that to learn more about humor. But I do want to ask a question here. Lewis had mentioned something that table topics should be about having fun. Now, I bet many of us are going to say, this is not fun, but some people are able to see it from a fun perspective. So learning how to let go of a lot of the things you're telling yourself is, I think, something Jason had said, that sometimes we tell ourselves negative things just before we're about to get up there. Like, what if I make a mistake? What if? And if you could just let that stuff go and take all the self-judgments off and just try to go up there and have fun. And one thing I teach people is that if you are confident when you speak, it does not matter how you feel inside. It's what you're conveying to your audience. So if you can walk up there looking confident, looking like you are thrilled to be going up there, as if you have an idea what you're going to say, even if you have no idea, you just look like you are going to have the best time of your life up there. And people will follow you. They will think, wow, this person seems prepared. And as you guys have all heard before, table topics do not have to answer the actual question. Although if you're at a contest, I would probably recommend you answer the question itself. But in your club, how many of us have ever heard table topics and someone got asked a topic and you thought, I wish I had gotten that one because I had the perfect answer for that one. And now I've got this other question. Well, you can perfectly say, you know, I think that's a great question that you asked. You've been asking a lot of great questions. In particular, the one you asked just before this was an amazing question, and I'm going to answer that. And you can do that. So you can, there are no rules to this. So if you can look up, as like Wilma would probably say, act like you're going to rule the roost up there. Like you are going to take over and this is your house. This is your space. You want to come across that way, even if you're not feeling it inside. Don't worry about that. One of the things we learn in Toastmasters is how to sometimes fake it till you make it.
Yes.
You get up, you just keep breathing, keep focused. One of the things that helps me in table topics is I always try to remember to say the word of the day, because you know we're all meant to use the word of the day, and there's no way once I get started in an impromptu speech that I'll ever remember what the word of the day is. So usually the first words out of my mouth is going to involve the word of the day. Or I'm going to refer back to somebody who spoke earlier and build on that. So there's lots of ways to get people's attention and be funny. Jason, you were going to say something?
Just a couple things. I'm going to go in reverse here. In a contest, the rules say you can't reference another person.
Okay.
So just make sure if you're in a contest, you're not referencing the person before you.
Anybody in your contest, yeah.
Right. Now, it might be interesting to say to the contest chair or whoever asked the question, I like the question you asked before, so I'll answer that one, even though it's all the same question. You might get a laugh out of that, but just for contest rules, you don't want to reference another person who's giving a presentation.
Well,
Also,
and in a contest, you would not actually hear the question until you go up there. So you would never
That's
know
true.
what people said before you. Yeah.
Right. You can't even mention a person. For
You can't
instance,
mention the person
and I
either.
were in a contest. If we were in the same contest and say she went first or I went first, whichever, I wouldn't be able to say, well, my friend Cynthia says such and such. And I would never be, I could be disqualified for that now. But I challenge every one of you to go back into your club and do something completely bizarre in table topics. That just like you would with a regular speech. You've done speeches where you did a business presentation, you did, you know, here's a collage of my grandkids. You talked about your cats. Go up and do something completely bizarre. I did a table topic one time. One time I've done this. I didn't know what to say, so I said, well, that's an interesting question. And then I stood there and just looked at the audience until the light turned green. It was the longest minute of everyone's life. And it was like, is she gonna say, and people are like, are you okay? Are you okay? I wouldn't say anything. I just, And then after once it turned green, I said, that was really a dumb question, and you know it was. Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster. And then I sat down, and they were like,
Best table topic ever.
Now that was a Jason specific answer, so thank you for sharing that, Wilma.
No,
Mina
but-
Thomas had mentioned something I thought I would just bring up too. She said one suggestion that she has heard is to prepare possible answers based on perhaps the theme of the meeting, because you can take off with that question, which may have something to do with the theme of the meeting, but you can tie it into the theme of the meeting and in some ways prepare a little bit beforehand, sort of in advance. And she said, and then you will have some material to work with. And she's from Austin Toastmasters, who, when I was a member of Austin Toastmasters, we had a gentleman named Conley, who was a terrible speaker. He almost never gave speeches, but when it came to table topics, he was amazing, because he would tell these wild, crazy stories, and he was a good storyteller, but you knew he was lying through his teeth. Nothing he said was true. He would just go off and make these crazy, wild stories, but he would win table topics hands down every time. And so you don't have to actually even make any sense. You can do all sorts of fun stuff and still succeed well with Toastmasters or with table topics. Let me just give one more comment here that John had said. Let's see here. Thank you for sharing. Okay. Oh, great. He's just sharing what he liked about it. So I would like to ask one other question of you guys. I use a method that works really well for me. It's called the PREP method. You guys have probably heard of it. PREP. So the P is because prep is so easy to remember, prep your table topic. So P is, what's your point? So as I'm walking up there and breathing, I'm thinking, what's going to be my main point here? So what's my point? The R, what's the reasons for my point? Which everyone's going to wonder, why did he say that? Then if you can give an example that can illustrate that point in some way, a story or a definition or anything. Stories are almost always best if you can. This is one great reason to keep a journal of stories of your life, especially funny stories of your life that you might be able to refer back to. Because I'll never be able to just pull it up, but if I write those things down, I have a place I can go to. And then the final piece is reiterate your point, just like the way you started your speech. See if you can bring that conclusion back, that story back, or that callback. And for me, that's the perfect table topic. And I can walk in there saying, I've got my skeleton to work off of. This is going to be my model, PREP, and I can work my way through that. Does anyone else have any other magic you use to help you just get up there with confidence?
I want to ask a technical.
Lee? Yes, Lee.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
I want to ask a technical question. In 12 years, and y'all kind of alluded to this, and I'm looking at Jason primarily. In 12 years, I've never seen anybody go, oh. And I've always felt like that is probably very impolite and kind of goes against the rules that we give everybody a chance to kind of think through the question, and the table topics master picks the person that they want to answer that question. But there have been a couple of times that I could have really nailed it. And Jason kind of said something that made me think that maybe some clubs are okay with that.
That's true. I mean, table topics can be handled a lot of different ways. The way you're describing, where the table topics master selects a person, is the appropriate way to do that. But sometimes my table topics master will ask for volunteers. That's when we get the running, the bottleneck is everybody charges the stage.
Mm-hmm.
But table topics is also meant to be a learning experience, not just, hey, can I tell a funny story, which is great, but it's how can I react to certain situations. I received a table topic, and specifically in the meeting, he says these are not to be humorous answers. And the table topic was, Donald Trump has just been accused of some affair. And you are his press secretary, and you are trying to dilute the anger in the room. Now, I could go all sorts of funny places with that, but the challenge of the table topic was to keep a straight face and make it through without the humorous part of the side. And
Jason?
that is really a good way to learn how to do something that you're not always ready to do. Mix
Jason,
it up a bit. Make
I
some funny
realize
ones. Mhm.
you've got a great reputation for asking tough table topic questions. I do not recommend that in a room that has fairly new Toastmasters.
Right.
Yeah, if you have advanced Toastmasters, I think, yes, challenge the heck out of them. But when
Mhm.
it comes to people who are fairly new, who are scared to death just to even get up there,
Yes.
keep it simple. Just as you know, in those contests, that question they ask of everybody in a contest is usually such a basic question. Anyone can find an answer to that.
Mhm.
And so it's meant to be simple. And Lee, one of the things that's my pet peeve is when a table topics master will ask a question first, giving people time to ruminate, and then ask somebody to volunteer to take it on. And they're choosing somebody who has an idea where they want to go. It's no longer an impromptu speech.
Yes.
This is an extemporaneous speech, one where you generally have some idea where you're going with this before you even get up there.
So then what we're saying, what we basically agree is it would be inappropriate for somebody to say, oh, I can nail this, give it to me. Okay.
That's one of my pet peeves. I do not think we should do that in a club.
Okay.
Have people who are already prepared to answer the question decide they'll come up there and answer it. It should be totally impromptu, where someone is called on and they don't know yet what you're going to ask them. Now they can raise their hand and say, I'll go up there. Okay,
Yes.
I'll choose you. Now here's your question.
Mhm.
Now that would be fair. That would be impromptu. Yes, Wilma.
I was going to say, one thing that you definitely want to be cautious of, if you have visitors or guests in your club, you want to make sure that you let them know in advance, hey, you can take part in our table topics. However, you don't want to spring something on them or a question on them that you would give to a more seasoned topics participant, a more seasoned member. So you do want to have something that will keep them engaged, move them or motivate them to say, hey, I participated and I'm going to sign on the dotted line with this club. So you definitely don't want to intimidate your guests, but it's always good to have your regular members go first and then say, hey, guest or Mr. or Ms. Guest, would you like to participate? And then have a question that is basic for them, not necessarily dumb it down, but I'm saying make sure it's something that is less likely to make them feel intimidated, uncomfortable, or, oh, I can't speak really well, so they gave me a hard question. You want them to feel comfortable.
It's something that anyone could answer, such
Exactly.
as, if you only had one place to choose to go on a vacation in your life, where would you go? Everybody's given some thought to something like that in the past.
Correct.
I didn't know the question at that moment, but the moment you told me that is, oh, I could share that. Or what did you do last weekend? That's an impromptu question. So they can be that simple.
Yeah. But I mean, if you're in a club and if you're in a meeting and then say you're a visitor and Jason says, okay, no humor, keep a straight face. If I were a guest, I'd be like, okay, so I don't know what to do with that. He could ask me on my birthday and I'd fall apart. So, you just want to make sure that you're cognizant of people who are visiting your club, who are guests, and then give them that out.
And Jason may know, oh, well, I can ask that question of Wilma or Cynthia, but I'm not going to ask this new guest that I don't know at all that question, who might scare them off and they might not ever come to a meeting again.
Exactly. Right.
Well, just as we have just a few minutes left, I do want to check and see, is there anything else you guys would like to add? Because I know it's just after 8 o'clock and I'm going to wind us down, but I just want to see what else you might like to add. And thank you all. Cynthia.
This is Cynthia. I realize in hindsight that we did use a lot of humor in our answers and may had projected that you should be humorous with table topic answers whenever possible. And I'm really glad that Lee brought up the other aspect and that Jason addressed it, because there are some questions that do not lend themselves to being humorous. And for someone who is not innately or inherently humorous, that could be more intimidating in itself. So I should say that you're allowed to give a real answer and a serious answer, not just humorous, but humorous is where I think once you get used to table topics, humor is where you go, because it's easy and it's funny. That's all.
Thank you. Wilma or Jason, anything to finish out?
This was beautiful. Thank you. I'm enjoying, I'm learning from the other panelists as well as the other members. I love Lou's comments. I think it's wonderful, and everyone's been quite eloquent in their participation and putting things in the chat and everything else. It was wonderful. Thank you.
And the other thing is, the next time there's a table topics contest, promote it so people can sit in the audience with no fear of ever being called on to see how it's done, to see the answers. If there's 5 or 10 people answering the same question, that's a great place to learn a lot in Toastmasters, is at a contest when you're in the audience.
Great. And Jason, anything to add?
I'm sorry. I would
Go ahead.
probably also add that when you're table topics master, of course, remember your audience that you're working with. A theme is often a great way to go with, such as, look what I found in this fortune cookie. Here's your fortune and your table topic.
There you go.
Warning labels are also so much fun to ask people. Who does this warning label apply to? Things to make it fun is always great. And just make sure it's always a chance to learn from it and not something that's going to be intimidating.
Well, thank you for that. And as you guys who are here can tell, you have 3 or 4 panelists, you will get 3 or 4 very different answers. If we had 10 panelists, it would be like that. There are lots of resources out there on the net where you could research on, well, what do you suggest is the best way to do impromptu speaking? You can learn a lot from what's out there. There are videos on YouTube. There's lots of great ideas, but everyone will have their own unique ideas as to what they think is the best approach. And as we had said, there is no one best approach. As long as you're entertaining people well and you make some sort of sense and it flows in some logical way, and you're within that 1 to 2 minute period, you will do great in table topics. The more you get up there, do them. I recommend to all clubs, whenever you have a speaker drop out, it's time for the table topics master to step up, and you're going to give maybe 5 or 6 more questions than you intended to give. And you just do a whole session of table topics so everyone gets a chance to practice. Because normally in a meeting, we only have time for 3 or 4. So this is a great opportunity to really make table topics a big thing in your clubs. It happens to us in our smaller clubs all the time where we only have 1 or 2 speakers and lots of extra time. Don't end the meeting early. Use this as an opportunity. Yes.
The other thing we do, sometimes we'll have 5 people in a meeting and 1 speaker. So we'll change table topics to 2 to 3 minutes or 3 to 4 minutes, so that we still fill up the meeting, even though we've only got 5 or 6 people in a meeting.
Well, Lee, there's no rule against having 2 table topics per person. So you can do all sorts of things. You just have to give people an opportunity. And as I said, there is no right or wrong way to run your meetings. There are standards, but it really is up to each of us to create our own culture of how we want to run our meetings, as long as it meets the needs of our members. So I want to thank our wonderful panel. Thank you, Cynthia, Wilma, Jason. Thank you all for taking time to be here tonight, and I really appreciate this. And please check out upcoming continuing education programs. That's what we're here to do, and we do appreciate your time. Thank you all.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you.
Have a good night. Take care.
You too. This is great.